In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create the vectors, model and toolpath this pretty love spoon. So the love spoon is a really nice gift to give to someone, whether that be for Valentine's Day, anniversaries, or as wedding gifts. And the idea is that these are actually wall hanging decorations. And I'm also going to show you how you can personalize them by applying some V-carved text to either side of the spoon, just to give it that more of a personalized touch. Right then, so let's go to File, Close. And so let's go and select to create a new file. So here we need to specify our job type. As we're creating a two-sided part, we're going to use the double-sided job type. Here I need to put in a width, so I'm going to go with 3.5 inches for the width and a height of 13 inches, and the material thickness that I'm working with is very precise here, it's 0.94. Okay, I'm going to set my Z0 position off the material surface for the top side, and then for the bottom side I'd like to zero off the same face, so I'm going to set the second side to be off the machine bed. XY position, lower left, flip direction, I'm going to flip that from left to right, and then the modelling resolution, I want to work with a very high modelling resolution there, and then we could go ahead and press OK. So the first thing that we're going to do is draw the heart bowl shape part of the spoon. Now for this I'm going to switch on the Smart Snap-in option. That will help me draw my heart shape, as it will enable me to snap to various points within my job. Now I'm only going to draw one half of the heart because I want to make it symmetrical, so to make my life easier I'm just going to worry about one half. Once I've got that perfect, then I can then mirror it over to the right hand side and join the two vectors together. So let's go ahead and use the polyline tool. So I'm going to snap to the centre line that runs through here. I'm going to go somewhere around here, click to begin my point, and then I'm going to come up somewhere around here, click to enter that point. Then what I'd like to do is make my next point in line horizontally with our first original point, okay, and then we're going to go somewhere around here, click to enter that in, and then I want to basically snap back to our centre line somewhere around here, so I'll click to enter that in, right click to come out of the polyline tool, and there is the left side of my heart. So now we need to basically smooth those corners. So to do that, we're going to put that into node edit mode. I'm just going to right click over this node here and say smooth point, right click over this node here and also use the option to smooth the point. Zooming in with the scroller of my mouse, I'm just going to adjust the handles on our nodes to really transform the shape of our curve. So for this handle here, I'm just going to line that up vertically like so, and just drop that down a little. This node here, I'm just going to bring that in, and then I'm just going to take that handle and just using my up arrow key, send that up. And this one here, I'm just going to bring that round. I'm going to take that node and maybe bring that down. And really all this is about is just tweaking with the handles until you're happy with the curvature that you have. Okay, so I quite like what we've got there, so I'm going to put that in normal selection mode, and I'm going to take that vector and then we're going to use the mirror option here. We're going to flip about the job center, create a mirrored copy, and we'll flip that horizontal, close that out, shift and select the other side, and then we're just going to join those two vectors using the most common point. Okay, so it's this option here, and so now we have one closed vector. And so with that vector, what I'd like to do is create an offset going outwards. This heart shape that we've just created, I'd like to represent as the kind of negative shape that we're going to apply to the bowl, and I'd like a border that is raised. So with that selected, we're going to go into the offset tools, we're going to offset that outwards by 0.2, and then we're basically going to say offset and that's going to do that for us. Close out, and we can see the offset there. So I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm just going to shrink this a little so it fits within my job space. So in selection mode, hold down Shift. I'm just going to just nudge that in ever so slightly. Click to come out of the transform mode, and then we'll use the option here to zoom to fit, and now we can begin to think about the weave pattern for the spoon itself. Now, to create the weave, I need one rail and a cross section, and luckily for us we already have a collection of weave files that we can make use of. So if we head over to the clip art tab, and under the weave section you can see all of the weave files that we have available. Now I'm going to take weave1 .crv3d. I'm just going to double click to bring that in. Okay, so it says that some layers you're importing onto are invisible. Would you like to show them? Yes, I'd like to see everything. Okay, so what have we got here? So you can see we have lots of different weave vectors that we can really take advantage of. There's lots in here, and this basically is for you to make use of with the extrude and weave feature. And you'll see we've also included some cross sections for you to use with that tool. But for more information on this, you can go to the extrude and weave tutorial from your tutorial browser. Okay, now in this case I don't want these ones, I don't want this one, and I'm just going to go and find the weave that I'm after. Okay, it's not this one. Okay, that's the one that I want. Right then, so it's this weave that I want, and we're just going to delete these cross sections. I'm only interested in this one here. I'm just going to move that out the way for now, and we'll come back to this shortly. So with this weave, I'd like to rotate it 90 degrees. So I'm going to use the shortcut key 9 on the keyboard, and that will rotate anything in increments of 45 degrees. I'm going to press F9 to snap that to the centre. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shrink it down a little. So putting it into transform mode by selecting it again, hold down Shift on one of the corners and then just simply drag that down. I'm just going to select the heart vectors and I'm going to move them down my job. They didn't need to be that high. Okay, and then I can take that weave and then I could look at bringing that up like so. Right then, so I think I like the position of the weave, how we've got it here. So now let's take a look at this cross section. So let's just zoom in a little. Okay, so you can see our cross section here. What I'd like to do is just increase the height of the cross section. So let's go into the drawing tab, into node edit, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take the bottom nodes like so, and just using the arrow keys, just drop those down a little. And then what I'd like to do is take the top nodes up here and just bring that in, just to kind of make this a little bit more rounded. And then we'll introduce the handles on the sides there and just nudge those up also. Okay, so I think that's okay. It's going to give us a nice rounded part when we come to extrude this cross section around this weave vector, and it will all make sense when we come to actually model the part. So now I'm going to add in one more vector to really complete the vector side of this modelling project. So going over to the clip art tab, I'm going to go into the 2D vectors folder. You can see I have a series of vectors that I can make use of. And here we have a heart panel 20, and if I just double click to bring that in, you can see we've got the heart here, and then basically I'm just going to go and scale this down. So I'm going to take that, Shift, scale it right down, and then I'm just going to keep that in the center. I'm just going to bring that down following that center line and kind of position that in place like so. Now if I just zoom in, I'm going to take the weave and I'm actually just going to move it up a little bit. I might move the whole thing up actually, so I'll just bring that up a notch, and then I'm going to take that heart and I just want to make that a little bit smaller. So this is basically just going to sit in between the weave and the heart itself. Okay, so something like this, and this is going to add just a little bit of extra detail to the spoon. Okie dokie. Right then, so if we press F to fit that to the screen, and we can see we've pretty much got all of the vectors that we need. Now there is one change that I would like to make here, and that's to the outer heart shape that we've got. You can see I've got quite a point at the bottom, and I really want to make that rounded, so I'm actually going to delete that offset, take the original heart, go back into the offset tool, but this time I'm going to undraw the create sharp offset corners option. That should give us a nice rounded bottom, so offset that, and you can see it's done that there for us. It's just going to have a much smoother shape to model from. Okay, so I'm happy with that. We'll close out, we'll use the option here to zoom to fit, and now what we can do is create a layer for our components. So when we create our components, they can go onto their own layer that we make for them. So if we go to the Layers tab, you'll see here that we have lots of layers that have no data on, and this has all been pulled from all of those different weaves that we saw when we brought that CRV 3D file in. So I'm just going to take a moment just to delete all of the layers that we do not need anymore, and then we're going to add in a new layer. So this new layer I'm going to call Components, and I'm going to move that to the top of our layers list, and that way when I create components on this active layer, they're not going to, the grayscales will not obscure any of the vectors that we can see here in the 2D view. Right then, so let's go and tile our windows horizontally so that we can see both the 2D and the 3D view. We're going to go into the Modeling tab. As I like to keep my layers organised, I also like to keep my levels organised. So I'm going to rename level 1, and we're just going to call this one Spoon. And then all the components that I create that are relevant to the spoon will sit within this level. So we're going to start by modelling in the weave shape for the spoon using this vector here and this vector here. And we're going to look at using this modelling tool, the Extrude Along One or More Centerline Vectors tool, or commonly known as Extrude and Weave. Now this tool allows us to select a drive rail, which in this case will be this vector, where we can then extrude a cross section along the centre line of the vector that represents the rail. And the nice thing about this tool is that where we have intersections, we can specify how we want the cross section to weave over and under by either scaling the cross section or adding a base height to the cross section. And then we can create a component that looks as though it's going under and over itself to create the weave effect. So let's select our vector for the rail, and then we'll use this option here, Use Selection. Now we need to select our cross section, which is this vector here. So working our way down the form, we're just going to undraw the Create Square Corners, and then going down we want to make sure we select this Weave Under and Over at Crossing section. So this is where we determine how we're going to weave into those intersections. Now in this case what I'd like to do is just scale the shape. Okay, so we're going to scale the shape 50% under and then 100% over. And then we could simply give that a name. We're just going to call this one simply Weave. Press Apply, and we can see that there. So we can see how it's going under, over, under, and then back on itself. So it's a really nice tool to use to create something that looks rather complex. So put that back in Z, and then we'll just simply close out of the Extrude and Weave tool. So now I want to look at modelling in the larger heart shape. So we're going to select that, and to do that we're going to use the Create Shape tool. Here we want to make that a curved profile. I'm going to give that an angle of 90 degrees. And in this case, what I would like to do is apply a base height here. So just going to add a little bit of a vertical height of 0.1. I'd like to limit the height of this, and we're going to limit that to 0.2. We're going to set the combine mode of that to merge so that it blends in with our weave shape. Give that a name. We're just going to call this one outer heart, like so, and then simply press apply to see how that looks. Okay, perfect. So you can see we've got a nice rounded edge that flattens off at the 0.3 because we've set the limit height here to 0.2. But remember, we have that base height of 0.1, which gives it a total height of 0.3. Perfect. So now what we can do is we can use this option over here to start a new component, and we can look at creating the shape for the inner heart. So I'm going to select that vector, and this time we want to make a recessed shape within that heart. So with that vector, we're going to go with a round profile, again 90 degrees. This time we are not going to have a base height, and I'd like to scale this to an exact height. So let's just use the slider to see how a part will look. Now at the moment it's currently set to merge, so I'm going to switch that and change that to subtract so you can see how that part will look. Okay, so I'm just going to increase that, bring that down. Maybe just be exact here and just put in 0.4 to see how that looks. Press spacebar to enter that in, and I kind of like what we've got there, so we'll leave that as it is, and then give that a name. So we'll call this one inner heart, and then we'll press apply, and then we'll just go ahead and start a new component. And then we're going to look at this mini heart here. So this vector over here basically serves two purposes. It's there to provide more decoration, and also just to give it more strength to this area of our spoon here. So with that vector selected, let's go into our create shape form. So we're going to go with a round profile of 90 degrees. Now I know that I'm going to need some base height to really lift that up here, so we'll come back to that shortly. We'll just see what it looks like when we come to apply various heights. So here we're just going to go with 0.4. Let's just press apply to see how it looks. Merge to add that in. Okay, so that's quite a lot of vertical height going in the centre there, so I need to really just bring that right down just to flatten it out. So at this stage I could do with adding in some base height here, so let's just bring that out. Okay, I might just want to round that up to 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so that heart's pretty much out there, but the shape itself I feel could do with flattening off. So let's just go to scale to an exact height, and we'll just go say 0.5. Okay, so it's got a nice flat shape there, and that looks okay. Perfect. So we'll put that in Z, and then we'll give that a name, and we're just going to call this one mini heart, and then we could go ahead, press apply, close out, and we're pretty much done with the vectors that we've got there. So one thing that I'd like to do is just increase the shape height of our weave. So I'm going to select that component, we're going to go into the properties. I'm just going to take this up to 1/4 of an inch. Press space to enter that in, and you can see it's really bulked that out, but we still have retained the actual weave intersections there. Okay, so that's much better. I think we've got more thickness to that, so that's perfect. Right then, we'll put it in Z, and then we'll just close out here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at adding decoration to the spoon by making use of some of the free clip art that we have. So let's head over to the clip art tab. So in the clip art folder, I know that within the panels and shields section I have a panel that is a heart shape. So we've got 3 different shapes there, and they all have different borders. So I want to take the rounded border. I'm just going to double click to bring that into our job. and then whilst it's in transform mode, I'm going to take one of those handles, hold down shift to scale that down in proportion, and just roughly put that in place like so. So bring that down, and then I'm just going to shift that up somewhere up the top here, and maybe bring that over just like this. So I can see in the 3D view that it's currently adding on top of our weave part of the model. So I'm just going to go and select this blue square that you can see here, and that will open up a mini properties form where I can make edits to the component whilst in the 3D view. So here we're going to set the combine mode of that to merge, and then I'm going to apply a base height here of 0.2 just to raise that up in front of our weave. Okay, so that's perfect, it's not too much, it just sits over the weave there. So I'll put that back in Z, and then we'll simply close out there. And now I'm going to look at adding in one more piece of clip art to go somewhere in the centre of the weave. So here we're going to go to Objects and People, and I'm just going to scroll my way down the list until I find something that is fairly suitable. For example, this here. So I'm going to double click to bring that in. And then I'm just going to roughly scale that down, holding shift to keep that in line. And then I'm just going to position that around the kind of top here, so somewhere like this. I might want to make that a little bit bigger, and then just bring that down like so. And we can see it's kind of hard to see what's going on here because it's currently adding on top of the weave. So again, if we select this blue square, just move that menu out the way, set the combine mode there to merge, and then we'll look at increasing the base height to lift that up in front of the weave. So let's just go with 0.2 and space to enter that in. That doesn't look too bad. So if we just zoom in on the 3D view and then just take that component, just nudge it down ever so slightly. Okay, so I think that's okay. Let's take a look at that from the side. Perfect. Right then, so we'll put that in Z, close that form down. In the 2D view, we'll press F just to fit that to our screen, and I'm pretty happy with the top part of the model that we've got there. And so just to finish, what I would like to do is to smooth out the heart bowl components here so that it isn't so sharp. Okay, so you can see we've got quite a sharp edge here. So to do that, I'm going to go into my modelling tab, and I'm going to take the outer heart, shift and select the inner heart, and I'm going to group them. Okay, with them grouped, I'm going to duplicate them, and I'm just going to switch the original group off. That way I have a safe copy, and then you can also take a look at that if you wanted to take a look at some of the settings for the group itself. So I'm just going to change a copy that we've just created here. And to smooth it, I'm just going to take that and simply use the smooth filter. It's going to warn me that we're going to bake, it needs to be baked in order for us to process this. That's okay. I have my safe group available underneath. And here we're just going to apply a maximum smooth, and you can see there the change that happened. If you missed it, I'm just going to go back to minimum, so that's how it was before, it's kind of sharp, and then I can maximize it, and you can see it's just really softened that spoon up. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. We'll put that in Z, and we are pretty much done with this side. So now what we can do is look at modelling the bottom side. So this is pretty easy because we can really pretty much copy the majority of what we've created over, apart from the bowl part of the spoon, as we would need to model that because we aren't going to use the same shape. But I am going to look at copying the outer heart vector in order for us to use to create that model. So I'm going to take that vector, I'm going to right click and use the option here to copy to the other side. Then I'm going to go and select all of the components that I need. So if we just zoom in onto the mini heart there, and then we're going to right click and use the option to copy to the other side. And that will send everything that I had selected to the other side. We switch over, we can see what our part looks like here. So, as I like to keep everything organised, I'm going to rename level 1, we're going to call this one spoon, and then we could look at modelling the back part of the heart bowl. So we're going to take that heart shape, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to go into the create shape tool, and again we're just going to specify certain dimensions in here. So we're going to go with a curved profile, 90 degrees. We're not going to have a base height in this case. I'm just going to scale that to an exact height. Let's apply it to see how it looks so far. Okay, let's set the combine mode of that to merge, and then let's just increase the heart there. So we're kind of looking at it like this. Perfect. I might just round that up to 0.5 in this instance. Spacebar to apply that change, and I'm happy with what we've got there. So then I can give that a name. We're just going to call this one heart, and then apply that, and then we can just simply close out, and then we've got our finished model together. Perfect. Okay then, so now what I'd like to do is just add in some finishing touches. So I would like to look at V-carving in some text to the spoon to add some personalisation. So I'd like to apply something to this heart. So this is like creating a message on the back of the heart. So as this would be traditionally given as a gift, I feel like it would be nice to really customise this part. So we're going to go and apply some text. So let's go into the drawing tab, and we're going to use the draw text tool. Okay, so I can see straight away where my text is going to be positioned. I can see the size of it, that's far too big here, so I'm just going to alter that. I'm going to go with, say, 1/4 of an inch in there, and I'm going to click to position that in this heart here, so maybe somewhere in the centre there, and then I'm just simply going to type in all my and then love. Okay, here I want to change the font, so I'm going to have a look through my list, take a look at Varney. I like the look of that, and then I'm simply just going to go and press close. Okay, so with that I'm going to take it, I'm just going to move it over here, and then I'm just going to rotate it ever so slightly, and then check that against the actual heart itself, like so. Perfect, so that's the bottom side. So let's switch back to the top side, and then here I want to add in some personalisation to the top heart. So again, text, we can see where it's positioned. I want to position it somewhere in the centre of this heart, and except this time what I'd like to do is make the text a little bit bigger, so I'm going to change that to 3/4 of an inch so I can see what that looks like. That's good. And here I'm going to apply a number. So this is intended as an anniversary gift, so I'm going to put in a 50-year anniversary. So I'm going to put in 50 for the text there, close out. I'm just going to zoom in, and I'm going to take that heart, I'm just going to right click, and I'm just going to go to the object properties. I'm just going to alter the fade in, make that 0% so I can see how this is positioned against the heart a little bit more easy. So rotate that, and then just nudge it over to the right, down again, and maybe rotate it a little bit more, and I think that looks pretty good. Right, and so I'll press F to fit that to our screen, and there we have our personal touches. So in terms of the overall design, we are now finished. And what we need to do now is just get our file machine ready. So what do I mean by machine ready? Well, we need to look at adding tabs to hold the spoon to the material. We also need to look at adding in a plane so that we can drop our finish tool below 0 when we're cutting the spoon out to remove the seam effect that we'll be left with around the outside of the spoon because of the fact that we've used a rounded tool to finish it. So we're going to start by going into our modelling tab, and we're just going to introduce another level here. So we're going to just minimise our spoon level, and we're going to insert a new level. We're going to rename that, and we're going to call this one tabs. So we're going to look at adding tabs to begin with. We're going to right click, set the combine mode of that to merge, like so, and then what we can do is we can then go into our clip art tab. We've got this section here called 3D tabs, and then we could look at adding in the tab roughly around there, and then we could just bring that over somewhere like this. I want to alter the shape height here, so here we're just going to bring that to 0.625 in this case, space to apply that, close out, and you can see that's pretty much okay. It's not really cutting into the roundedness of the weave, and obviously we'll be doubling this up by copying the tab over to the other side, so we will have a total tab height or thickness of 1/8 of an inch. Okay then, so with that we're going to basically copy that tab. So I'm going to take it, hold down Control and just put one in position here, Control, and then move that into position over there. And then Shift and select all of those, and then Control Shift H is the keyboard shortcut to basically mirror and copy items over horizontally. Okay, so there are all my tabs. So that's pretty much it for the tab side of things. So let's go into our modelling tab. And then we're going to select all of those tabs, and we want to copy those over to the other side. So we'll right click, say copy to the other side. That'll send them all over onto the bottom side for us. So we can switch over, you can see they've been added there. So again, let's just create a new level. We're going to rename that level, call that one tabs. Set the combine mode of that to merge, and then we're going to take those tabs that we copied over, we're going to put them in that level. Okay, so we've got our tabs, so now our spoon will be held soundly in place to our material block. So now what I want to do is look at creating a plane that will specify where my tool drops to. Now as it stands, my tool will only reach to 0 when cutting around my part. So this would more than likely leave me with a seam as I'm going to use a round tool to cut the finish pass with. And so creating a plane on one side, which we'll do on the bottom side, with a negative height will basically bring the tool down, and thus this will eliminate any existence of a seam or cusping that will get around the edge of our spoon. So to do that, we're going to create another level, insert a new level, rename that, and we're just going to call this one plane. We're going to set the combine mode of that to merge, and then what we're going to do is add in a 0 plane. Okay, so our 0 plane is currently at 0, so we're going to go into the properties here, and we're just going to drop this to negative 0.1 space to enter that in, and then we can close out. And so the idea here is that when we come to cut this side, our tool's going to drop to negative 0.1, and so that will remove any form of cusping because we're essentially cutting into the other side. Okay, so at this stage, we're almost ready. One final thing that we need to do as part of my two-sided operation is to create some dowel holes so that I can align my spoon accurately when I come to flip the material over to machine the other side. Now I've measured my dowels, they come up as 0.33, so I'm going to go into the drawing tab, use the draw circle tool, I'm going to put in a value of 0.33 in there, and then simply just click randomly into different areas of my job to position those dowels. So doing this randomly and non-symmetrically just means that there would be only one way for us to flip our material over to regain alignment. So if we close that down, with that selected, we're going to shift and select the other circles. I'm going to use the option here to copy to the other side. So when we switch back over, you can see we've got the vectors of those dowels there. So now we're ready to create the toolpaths. So let's switch over to the toolpaths tab. So the first thing we need to do, as always, is check over our material setup. So at this stage we want to make sure that everything that is listed here is replicated when we go to cut this on our machine. So our material thickness is 0.94, XY 0 position is going to be in the lower left hand corner. We're going to set the Z0 for the top side on the material surface. Then we want to position our model within our material. So I'm going to put it bang on in the centre of our material. So we've got a tiny gap above and below. Okay, then you want to check over your rapid Z gaps, home start position and the Z gap above the material, ensuring that they're all safe and appropriate for your own setup. So here I'm going to go ahead and press OK. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at running the dowel holes into our material. So with those three vectors selected, we're going to apply a profile toolpath. So we're going to cut down 0.7 into our material using a 1/4 inch end mill. We're going to machine on the inside of our vectors. I'm just going to use the Show Advanced Toolpath options to bring up some of the advanced options that I can choose from. And here what I would like to do is add a ramp to the toolpath where we're going to apply a spiral ramp. So it's going to spiral ramp into that vector. And we're just going to give that a name. We're going to call this one Profile Dowels and then simply press Calculate. Okay, so you can see how that's going to spiral into our part. Put that in Z and then simply go ahead and preview that. At this stage what I would do in terms of the physical setup is just double check that my dowels actually fit in here, and if they don't then I'll just oversize them until my dowel does fit in place. So let's just assume that our dowels do fit here. So just going to close out. And now we're ready to run a 3D roughing toolpath to hog out the majority of the material of our spoon. So we're going to go over and use the 3D roughing toolpath. So here we're going to use a 1/4 inch end mill, and now we need to specify our machining limit boundary. Now in this case I'm going to use this option here to machine by level. If we just pull out our modelling tab over on the left, you know we've got a spoon level and we've got a tabs level. So the idea here is I'm going to use the spoon level as our machining limit boundary, and what it does is it takes the components that are within this level and it uses that as a 2D boundary. But because we're machining by level, it's still going to include anything in the composite model that is within that 2D boundary, and that will enable me to keep my tabs in place. And it will do that because I'm going to specify a boundary offset. So first off we're going to say spoon as my level, and then for the boundary offset we're going to go with 1/8 of an inch. It's going to come out past the components within the spoon level by 1/8 of an inch, so we're going to see 1/8 of an inch of that tab in place, and that's going to enable us to hold our spoon together. Okay, we're going to have a machining allowance of 0.02. We're going to do that in a Z-level strategy where we're going to raster along the x-axis, and then we could give that a name. We'll just call this one simply 3D roughing, and then the software will go ahead and calculate that for us, and then we can go and preview that. Perfect. So let's close out there, and now we're going to apply our 3D finish toolpath. So in here we're going to specify a tool. This time I'm going to use an 1/8 inch ball nose to really finish this off. Again, I'm going to use the selected level, the spoon level, and I'm going to have an offset of 0.1 in there. We're going to apply a raster strategy, so it's going to go back and forth, leaving the angle at 0, so it's doing that along the x-axis, and then we could simply go ahead, call that one 3D finish, press calculate. It's going to take a little bit longer to calculate that this time because we're working with much more finer detail, and then we can preview how that part will look, and we can see how that's going to look in our 3D view. So you can see we've got our tabs coming through there. Perfect. Okay, so at this stage what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at doing a V-carving for our 50 anniversary item over here onto the heart. So let's close out. We're going to select the 50 vector. We're going to go into the V-carve toolpath. And here we're going to specify a tool. So if we go to our V-bits, you can see I've got a 90-degree half-inch tool. So I'm going to make use of that, and we'll go ahead and press OK. But what I need to do is make sure that I project the toolpath onto the 3D model. So it's going to basically locate where the model is, and then it will create the V-carving on there. So just simply call that one V-carve, and then we'll put 50 on the end, and then we'll press calculate here, preview that, and we can see how that's going to look. Okay, so that is our top side complete. So we can close out there. Now in terms of the physical setup here, now that we're done with the top side, we're going to take our material block off of our machine. And our next operation is we're going to take the dowels of the bottom side, and we're going to machine a profile pass into those dowels directly into our spoil board. Okay, so we're not having any material here. Now, just one thing we want to do is just double check. We want to glance over our settings. So here, this time, remember we are setting Z0 off the machine bed this time because we're always referencing from the same face. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel out there, and we're going to select the vectors that represent our dowels into the profile toolpath. Now because we are setting Z0 off the machine bed, I need to put in a start depth of Z equals, which is my material thickness. It's going to drop down by the material thickness, and then it's going to cut in to a cut depth that we specify in here, in which case we're just going to go with 0.7 again. Here you just want to make sure that your dowels can fit into the 0.7 in the spoil board, as well as the 0.7 of the dowels that we machined into the top side of the material. So this is really relevant to the size of your dowels. Specify a tool, so using end mill, we're going on the inside. Again, what I'd like to do is add a spiral ramp in there. Here we're going to call this one profile dowels, no material, just to remind myself. Press calculate. It's going to warn us we're going to cut through. That's okay, I intend to cut into my spoil board. So you can see it's going to drop down by a material thickness, and then it's going to spiral into our spoil board. Now I needn't preview this because that's just going to eat into my material block, which is not really what we'd see here. We're only cutting into the spoil board at this stage. So now we can continue to machine the actual spoon itself. So again, we're going to go and apply a 3D roughen toolpath using a 1/4 inch end mill, and again we're going to specify a level, and again we want to specify the spoon level. And the nice thing about doing this by level is that now we're also including any components in other levels, and in particular for the bottom side, remember we put in that 0 plane, that we changed the height of it to a negative height of 0.1, so that will enable our tool to drop down 0.1 past 0, so that we get rid of any form of cusping or seam. So make sure we select the spoon as our basically our 2D boundary, but it's going to include everything else that we've got within our composite model. Okay, so the same boundary offset, exactly the same settings, so we'll just simply go ahead and press calculate there, and then we could preview that, close out, we'll run a 3D finishing toolpath, again exact same settings that we applied to the top side, press calculate. Like I said before, it's going to take a little bit longer because we are working with a finer tool and much more detail. So the software is going to take a little moment to do that. Okay, so there we have all the detail there, perfect. So this is what it's looking like so far. And the final thing that we need to do is just do that V-carve. So we're going to take that text, use the V-carve toolpath, same tool, ensuring that we project that toolpath onto our 3D model. Press calculate, preview that, and that's what our part will look like. And so if we maximise the 3D view and just close out of the preview there, that really completes this example of showing you how to model a two-sided love spoon. And the really nice thing about this is you could use this for all sorts of occasions: Valentine's Day gifts, wedding gifts, anniversary gifts, and it's very interchangeable. All you'd have to do is simply alter the text that you apply to make it more personalized for yourself. So let's just go ahead and save this file. So go to File, Save As, and we're going to call this one Love Spoon. Press save, and then you can access that from your project folder.